I mean, he rules over everything. He rules over mankind, over all kings, over all authorities, over Iraq, over Iran, over China, over North Korea, over Turkey, over Morocco, all these places. He rules there right now, the spiritual realm. He rules over all the spiritual authorities. Ephesians tells us he's over all things, and all things are above him. I mean, he's above them, and they're all below his feet. And guess where we are? We're in his body, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But basically, he rules over all spiritual authorities. Christ rules. Verse 17 tells us that he is the glue for the physical and spiritual universe. He's the glue. He holds it all together. He's not just dominion over it, but if he didn't exist, it would just like boom. That's why, and this is the thing, when he was on the cross, you know what the worst thing that happened to Jesus on the cross? Wasn't the thorns, wasn't people poking him, wasn't all these horrible things that I could not endure. Any of those things, any one of them, I couldn't do it. I don't think I could. But the worst thing that happened to him was when he prays the last prayer, he says, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? Because for the first time in the universe, the Trinity, somehow, I don't understand it. If Jesus didn't say it, I would almost sound, heretical. But Jesus, somehow the Trinity had some separation going on. And what happened? Earthquakes. People came back from the grave, literally, out of the graves. Like, it's walking around the cemetery. People start walking around. Things go weird, crazy wrong. Because for some reason, God, I don't know how it worked, but he turned his back on Christ. There was a point where part of God felt forsaken by God. I don't know how to explain that with my limited words, but I can tell you, it messed up things for a little bit. Okay? It was cataclysmic, crazy, breaking into sin. That's how powerful it was, though. Totally robbed all of sin of its power and infused righteousness into the world, and that's what it took, that kind of cataclysmic nuclear power to make that happen. So he is the glue for the universe. He's the head of the church in verse 18. We talked about that. He's the head over, it's not pastors, not apostles, not prophets. Christ is the head over everything. He's our Lord, our ruler. We listen to him. We do what he says. Over death. He's the firstborn from the dead. Verses 18 again, it says he's the firstborn from the dead. And then he has dominion over death. Christ rules over death. Why do you say it's the firstborn? You ever wonder about that? Obviously, there are other people that were raised from the dead. Jesus raised people from the dead before he actually raised from the dead, right? Right? So why could he be the firstborn from the dead? The reason is he was the first one that came back to life in bodily form. Meaning that he came back in his resurrection form. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like Jesus came back. That's why, he says, look at my hands here to the disciples. What I'm getting at is that when Lazarus came back to the life, or the girl on the funeral pyre and other things that he did, they died again, which wasn't really good for them. And they had to die twice, if you really think about it. I mean, he was doing that for his glory. They had to submit to his glory because, really, if you're dead, especially in the case of Lazarus, he loved Jesus. I don't imagine if he was asked about it, consulted a little bit, that he'd want to go back to earth. Like, okay, I get to do that again. Wow, it was fun the first time. Let's try it again. I don't think, like his friends were praying for that, but I don't think he was. What I'm saying is Jesus, though, was the first person that came back and didn't die again. Won't ever die again. So he's the firstborn. He has rule over all of death, over sin also. In verse 19, he rules over sin. When that cataclysmic event happened and righteousness went into the world, Satan was defeated. And sin has no authority, no power, and we can be made perfectly righteous. And he claimed it because he lived a perfect life and had nothing happen. So he was the image of the invisible God. So he rules over everything you can possibly think about. He rules right now is the thing. And now I'm going to explain what I mean even further by that. Oh, you know what? I got into that. There you go, right there. Pretty cool. I'm glad I did that PowerPoint presentation. All right. He has overcome sin. What's our mission? Our mission is this, the truth. Christ rules now, not just later in the past. He will rule no more in the future than he does right now. I talked to y'all about that. Secondly, the trouble. Many of Christ's subjects in both realms are in open rebellion and revolution. In other words, a king or the president, let's say George Bush, can rule with all authority that's been given to him. I can choose, even though President Bush is still President Bush, to tell you, I don't believe that there is a President Bush. I think it's just a fake thing I see on TV. I don't believe that he really has authority. I choose not to agree with the Constitution. Did I change President Bush's authority? No. And let's say a bunch of people get together and decide that. It falls at some point because it's a human constitution. But the point is that any king can have subjects that are in open rebellion, and it doesn't change his ruling. In the dark places of the world, Christ rules. Satan lies to us. And I'll tell you that. The truth. Christ rules, no. The trouble, the task. To awaken all realms to the truth. That's our task. That's our mission. You see, what I said, Christ rules now, not just later. Many of his subjects are in rebellion. Our task is quite simply to awaken all people to the fact that Christ rules. Not to make Christ rule. He already rules. He's already ruling in the heavenly realms. He's already ruling in the physical realms. Our job is to awaken people to that truth. We're not to reign. We're not to encourage him to reign. He doesn't need our help. What he calls us to do specifically is to awaken people to the fact that he does reign. And he really doesn't even need us there, but he asks us to, and for some reason has asked us to participate. That is ministry. To awaken people to the truth that Christ reigns, that God is in charge. To awaken Christians, because we forget, and to awaken non-believers, because they don't know. And they're in rebellion. Wherever the king of darkness, Satan, rules, it is a false authority. So the dark places, he doesn't really rule. He's taken false authority. He's purported himself to rule. He makes us look in the physical realm like, wow, he's got a real stronghold there. You hear? You follow me? But he wants us to think, Satan wants us to think that we have to dethrone him and then enthrone God. Kind of do a swap. It's a trick. It's a very subtle trick, but it's a trick. We don't need to dethrone him because Christ already rules. What we are is to be messengers of light and hope and to awaken people to that as God uses his grace through us. And when I've seen it at the University of Texas and other places, when people get that, Satan doesn't go, I'm going to hold on real tight because I've got authority here. He flees. He takes off. He runs. And all of a sudden you'll see changes. When the ministers began to pray at University of Texas and they looked and they did a survey of the whole campus and found out that a certain number of students had come to Christ. It was very, very pitiful out of 50,000 students. We surveyed. That's one of the things we do as a ministry. We say, hey, let's all figure out what's going on here. Not just what's going on in Crusade or in Varsity Chi Alpha, but what's going on corporately. And we do spiritual mapping. We found out that this many students came to Christ in this particular year about 10 years ago, or 7 or 8. They were broken by that figure because I remember them saying to one another, I thought you were doing better than I did. I mean, you've got a church of 1,000. You've got a church of 1,000. You must have more. And no. They found that out. So they began to pray and they said, God, what should we do? How do we do this? Where do we go? And God answered them. And after a semester of praying and doing nothing different physically, except praying and asking God to bring transformation, revival to their ministries, their same evangelistic efforts produced twice as many in one semester as it had produced the whole year prior. Why? Because once they began to heal wounds between them, and give up the apathy that they had about not meeting together. Once they had done that, things happened in the heavenly realms that they didn't see until it began to happen in the physical. That's when they saw it. That they were taking authority back from Satan. Because what does it say? Christ is the head. He's in charge. Ephesians says, then we're in the body. And where is Satan? He's not in the body. He's not struggling level. He's under the feet of Christ. So, when he comes here in the church, or even in the world to some degree as well, in a different way, he's taking false authority. It's not his. And when we say, the truth is this, and we're going to pray into that and trust God for that, he's like, I can't grab a hold of that. He flees. And we see that to different levels as we begin to realize that. So it's a subtle trick, but it's very important to realize that Christ reigns right now. That's the theology through the centuries, not just mine. We change that a little bit around, and it's important, but it's not a sovereign mentality where we just say, well, God, do whatever you want. You're sovereign. I'm not going to do anything. I believe in God's sovereignty. But what I'm saying is that, in fact, that's what I'm telling you, is that he is sovereign and he is ruling right now. It's not going to get better in the future in that sense. But what's going to happen in the future is more and more places are going to come into the realization that he is king. And one day, he will visibly appear, and when he does, it will be so powerful, so amazing to people that they will have no choice but to submit. But it's not because all of a sudden he reigned more then. It's because there's just, it's like I always compare it to this. If you get in a rocket ship and you take off towards the sun, if I said there is no sun, 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 some point between here and the sun, I'm toast. Because the sun, just by its mere existence, will exert its force on me and I'm gone. No matter how much willpower I have. Not because the sun wants to, or just because it's the sun. And when God visibly manifests himself at the end of the age, that's why every knee will bow and every tongue will confess, not because God goes, do it, just because he is. And they will go, oh, boom, the whole world. I'm serious. That's what it is. He's just going to visibly, and what we are to be about is ushering that in, I think, in some sense. Not in the sense, I'm not getting, this is a whole nother theology. I'm not saying ushering in the coming of Christ. Maybe we might, but what I am saying, though, is right now that we can all agree on is that we are to be about, in all instances, awakening people to the truth that God reigns right now and bringing them out of rebellion into reconciliation with Christ, through Christ, in Christ, because he's over all and in all and above all and through all. Ephesians. The scope. This war that we are seeing in the heavenly realms that plays itself out in the physical realm, the war for revival, for transformation, began before time and will continue into the end of time. Isaiah 14, Revelation 20 shows you both ends of that. Isaiah 14 is about Satan and taking away a third of the angels. Revelation 20 is about the final battle between the two. It began before time, will continue to the end of time. It's an ancient battle. It's more than just the 50 years, 60 years, 10 years, whatever I live here on life. And you too. This is very small. Our area here can be impactful, but as far as it's beyond us, we got to realize that this is a battle that has been going on. And why that applies practically as well is when you're in your city or in your ministry or in your church or anywhere, you are not just walking into a blank slate like we think. That's a very nice American idea. But you're walking into a whole history of warfare. Right? And we know what happens when you ignore history and you just go to a place and you do something without thinking about the past. And you think you're just going to come in, right? What happens in the natural? I won't even say, but we know. We get problems. And what I'm saying here is that we have to realize this battle is cosmic. And when we begin to focus on ourselves in the here and now, we get into the physical, we forget the enormities that are going on when we walk into a space. And campuses are the same way. There are no civilians. There are no civilians in this. We were all born into a war zone, Christian or non-Christian. Even in our pre-birth times, when we're in the wombs, think about abortion. I mean, boom, taking people out before they're even out of the womb. There is warfare going on the second. We don't even will it to be in it. We don't get to choose. We were born into a war zone, whether we see it or not. There are no civilians in this war. This is true even for those who don't see it, as I just said. The players are spiritual beings and humans. The players in this war. As you look at it, there are spiritual beings, angels, demons, God, Christ, the Holy Spirit, and then there are humans. Spiritual beings are tremendously stronger than humans. That's why the Bible says, don't just go around wantonly talking bad about Satan even. Don't just do that. Don't just walk around, whatever. Don't do that. Because they are more powerful than us in and of ourselves. I'm going to get to the part about Christ in us. Don't worry. This is not a pull yourself up by the bootstraps message. But the point is that we have to respect not only the spiritual authorities in the heavenly places that are God's forces, but also the spiritual forces in the heavenly places that are about our destruction. I don't mean respect in the sense of worship, but I don't even mean in the sense of fear, but I mean that we don't just go playing with things just to play with them. That neither side of this spiritual war is random. Neither side is random or without purpose. There is no such thing, guys, as random evil in that sense. And the way we may talk about it sometimes, I don't believe that. I believe God, you've heard about intelligent design. He intelligently designed the world. Many of us believe that. I believe that. But there's also, on the upside, intelligent evil. It's not some force out there, just like God is not some force in the trees. The Bible tells us that there's an evil force that is arraying itself against us, is organized, and is fighting against God, really, and anyone who gets in the way of that. It's real, right now. And it is purposeful, it is calculated, and the beings are ancient. It is really dangerous, the scope of this war. It is not just a nice metaphor for us to talk about. Not something kind of cool to talk about. It is dangerous. People get taken out. It may happen to me. It's a war. It's nasty. It's uncomfortable. It's not fun. In the sense of, I'm a soldier on a mission. I think that's fun and that's exciting. But it's not fun like, hey, the pastorate, just go into that and do the pastorate or go into ministry or work in your neighborhood or whatever because it's, you're going to be more, just happy in God and all that. True, but you're entering a war. A war. And if you were to go to Iraq right now and you said, there is no war, la la la, la la la, and you walk down the road, you're going to get blown up. Doesn't matter whether you agree with it or not. Doesn't matter whether you agree with me either. You're in a war. You either realize it or you don't. I'm offering the truth. If you don't realize it, you will still be impacted by it. We all will. When I forget about it and I start focusing on the natural and the here and now, I'm impacted by it, even though I've forgotten I'm in a war. And it's happened to me over and over again. University of Temple. I'll talk about campuses. I'm going to get there. It'll be exciting, y'all. Great stories. University of Temple, though, I'm going to give you a short snippet here. They did a prayer room out in the middle of campus a couple weeks ago. They put a tent up. They began to pray. The first day they began to pray, I would say a demon-possessed guy came in, talking to himself, blaspheming God, interrupting the prayer, whatever. He just wouldn't leave. Hailstorm came down on the tent. Windstorm came down. Ice, then rain. It was like all in one day, all the weather you could have. It was weird. Blew the tent down. Because these guys, they were so full of faith, they made their own tent. They didn't have enough money, or I don't know what it was. So they went to Home Depot and got like PVC pipes and put it like tarp over it. I'm telling you, the students are wild, you know? And so this wind, sleet, hail, demonic guy, all this stuff the first day, they kept praying. 24 hours a day, they kept praying. Because this is going to be a week and a half thing for them. They're praying 24 hours a day. Students are coming in praying. This guy doing whatever he does. Second day, the weather went better. The man disappeared. There was a war in the heavenly that had to be won because there had never been a prayer room right in the center of University of Temple campus in Philadelphia. There's a history there. But did Satan go, no, he didn't like dig in. And I mean, that happens. I mean, but the point is that we have to persevere because we know ultimately the real truth is that Christ reigns in that moment. And if we look in the physical realm, we go, man, Satan reigns here because there's people coming and there's rain and blah, blah, blah. And we get into this, but if you press in and keep persevering and seeking God and asking him to move, boom, Satan has to fall. He doesn't have the authority. It's not real. It's not true. There is not a current that we are going against that's so mighty in this nation that there's all this evil in our nation. Don't get me wrong. But that evil is not as mighty as we think it is. It's mighty, yes. But we serve a God that is so infinitely more mighty, that has a stream that started, I'm spitting now, there's a stream that started before history. And we are in that stream of history that's going to culminate. It is a massive river. So we are not going upstream. The reality is we are going fast downstream. And I'm going to talk about that, about what this means for where we are right now in history. It's amazing. It's very important to understand spiritual warfare where we are in history and practice it. Really dangerous. Satan is more evil than we can imagine. 1 Peter 5:8. Be of sober spirit. Be on the alert. Your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking someone to devour. If you can imagine a really bad person, a really evil person, a really bad thing, somebody you might be angry at, you're not even halfway there when you're describing the adversary of God and his evil capabilities. You're not even halfway there. And I'm not exalting him because God is makes Satan look like a dumpling. I mean, God is infinitely more powerful. This is not an exalt Satan moment. This is just saying what the Bible says. I mean, I don't know. Be mad at that. I don't know. He looks like for someone to devour. Don't pretend like he's not there. He is dangerous. He's more evil than we can imagine. He is intelligent. He is focused. He is trying to oppose God. But God, as I start off telling you, Christ is the authority of the church. He rules over everything. God is more good than we can imagine as well. That he's equally more good, if not, he's infinitely more good than Satan is evil. So here are the implications. This is a fun one. You must die. We must die. Colossians chapter 2, we move into the second chapter, not taking this out of context. You can go through the whole book and look at it. Colossians chapter 2, after it talks about what we just talked about, chapter 2, verses 9 through 12, says this. I'll read it on my Bible instead of off the screen. For Christ, all the fullness of deity lives in bodily form. You have been given fullness in Christ, who is head over every power and authority. In him you were also circumcised, and putting off the old sinful nature, not with the circumcision done by the hands of men, not something we can muscle up or work hard at, but the circumcision done by Christ, having been united with him in baptism and raised with him through your faith in the power of God who raised him from the dead. You were buried in baptism. The entry into Christianity, the entry rite is baptism. That is a symbol of death and resurrection, but not our resurrection, Christ's resurrection in us. Christ's resurrection in us. If you look in chapter 1, it finishes by saying this, chapter 1, verse 28. No, verses 27. God has chosen to make this mystery known among the Gentiles, the glorious riches of this mystery. What is the mystery? That Christ is in you, the hope of glory. We must die. We have to die completely. That's baptism. We are dead. There is nothing more of us. And Christ, we are vessels. Christ lives in us. And he empowers everything in us and changes it and transforms it for his glory. All the things he made us to be that got warped by sin, he restructures. Outwardly we are wasting away, but inwardly we are being renewed day by day. And we have to die. Don't live, because the outward stuff that you live, if you're alive, if you don't die to everything, that outward stuff is wasting away. And the reason why we don't die is because we begin to believe, it gets into spiritual warfare, we believe that this is real, and in some sense it starts shouting at us louder than the spirit realm, and we begin to believe that we shouldn't die, because the real power is here. We should work harder, more money, more time, more energy. But Christ says, no, you must die. You are not the answer. I am the answer, and you cannot live. You must die. Christ can live fully in you. You must die so that Christ can live fully in you. Any area that is still alive is a potential grip for the enemy in this war. However, a dead person has no weak spots and is a huge threat to the enemy. If you want to be alive, have fun. If I want to be alive, I've had fun. You're going to get beat up. I know. I just know it. I've lived it. I've done it. And what I'm saying is we have to die. I put the example here of my business. I started a business a couple of years ago with my wife, 7 years ago, whatever. Last year, 2004, it grossed $500,000 worth of sales. My goal was to help support CRM, Campus Renewal Ministries, because I wasn't making enough money in the ministry, wasn't able to support my family, needed to have extra income, tried to do that, tried to start a business. And two things happened. One, I realized I didn't have enough time for it, to do it well. I had to make a choice between what God had told me to do and the business. Now, sometimes God says to many people, equal ministers, that they should do businesses. But for me, in my life, God said, no, I don't want you to do that in this moment. I want you to transition, and you need to make the choice. Are you going to hold on to that provision, or are you going to believe that I'm your provision? And then, on top of that, because Satan exists, our manager decided that he would steal a lot of our company's secrets and sell to our own customers using our vendors. And then told my staff of CRM, which offices out of the office, bad things about me, which weren't true. Just made up, whatever. Told our other staff at my company about things about me. And in about a week's time, I lost all my employees except for one. My sales dropped, and it was been taken away. And plus, also, I wasn't able to be there to watch over it all because I was traveling. I had to make the choice. We have to die. Cannot hold on to anything. Nothing. Our wives, our children, our lives, our jobs, our hopes, our dreams, our hair, our feet. Cannot hold on to any of it. Have to give up. Have to be willing to say, not me, but only you can live in me. We have to die in order to win the spiritual war, in order to see revival. That's the reason why we don't see revival a lot, I think, is because we're unwilling to die. I'm unwilling to die. I want to live. I want to be alive. I don't want to die. I don't want to be on the altar. I don't want to say, not my will, but yours. In every situation. When I'm walking down the hall, not my will, but yours. Do I turn left or do I turn right? Because I don't know. I'm not alive. You are. Every area of my life. Do I eat this? Do I not eat that? Do I wash the dishes now or later? Do I talk to this person? Do I sit here? More broader questions. What do I do for a living? Things like that. But everything, minutia to macro, we must die. Number 2, we must be humble. Oops. Be humble. That same passage in 1 Peter where it says the devil roars around like a lion, looking for someone to devour. It starts off, if you look at 5 through 6, it talks about being humble, that God, I don't have it memorized, unfortunately. I should. Anyone have that part memorized? You want to quote it for us? Cool. I was just curious. All right. Let's see. Yes, that's right above it. And then God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Humble yourselves, therefore, under God's mighty hand, that he might lift you up in due time. Then cast all your anxiety on him because he cares for you. The devil prowls around like a lion. That's the context of it. So we have to be humble, meaning we have to know where our strength comes from. Not that we pretend like we're weak or that we're not as good as other people. We just have to know that anything that's in us came from him. And anything that's in us good is because we died and he lives. And so that's humility, knowing where we come from. If we know that, then the implications of the spiritual war is, if we are not humble, then we have our head too high and it's going to get chopped off. If we think like Samuel was talking about last night, if we think we're doing it and we get into ourselves, what happens when you see that happen to leaders? They get chopped off. I think about a friend of mine, the guy that was the leader of one of the largest ministries in America, who helped me get started. It was a March for Jesus ministry. He had something happen to him where he ended up running off with another lady who was his stepsister. His father had run off at the same exact time in his life when he was about the same age with that's his stepsister's mom. You believe that that's not intelligent evil? And he said to me, I don't know. I know this is wrong, but I just have to do it. And what I tell you is that the only thing that will keep me from that or you from that is not, let's try harder, let's be more pure. Yes, true. But the real thing that will keep me from that is when I am humble to no extent. And I say, it is not about me, and every day I realize it is about you, and I'm dependent on your power every single day. The moment I begin to forget that is the moment I'm setting myself up for goodness knows what. Get my head chopped off because it's a battle. Incidentally, the battle is never over. We're still praying for him, and I'm praying that the battle is, it's not over till it's over, Persistence, faithful widow. Look upward, next one. You have been raised with Christ. Keep seeking the things above. This is Colossians, moving further through Colossians, where Christ is seated at the right hand of God. Set your mind on the things above, not on the things that are of earth. That's what I learned the hard way when I was at UT. If you focus on the natural, then you begin to miss the things. And we work so hard. And I hear pastors and ministers tell me we're working harder and harder and getting less and less results. I'm telling you, no matter how hard we work, it will not produce the revival or really even anything of significance. I just know it. I've done it. We have to focus on the things we don't see because that's where faith is. Faith is the evidence of things unseen, the things that are hoped for. Faith and evidence and believing in that, trusting in God is the spiritual warfare. It's practicing the thing of when I walk up and down these halls or a university or a bar or whatever it is that's a big boogeyman or whatever in our lives or whatever we feel, our fears, whatever. When I'm that, I'm realizing that I'm here in the physical realm. This is a very real place. God created it. But that there is something else that's affecting all this that is also here, that's also interacting, and that has to be touched first. And what we do often is we get so focused because we can see this, which is not faith, but we see this. It's so immediate, shouting at us, that we go, man, I got to fix that. I got to work on that.